Well, Andrew, it's actually the district attorney in Warren County, Pennsylvania, who's a longtime gun owner. Now, recently he decided to get a medical marijuana card, and when he did that, he had to give up his guns and the concealed carry permit he got from his local sheriff. He says that's a violation of his Second Amendment rights, and so he's suing the federal government. Shooting and hunting are among the most popular hobbies in Pennsylvania, enjoyed by hundreds of thousands of residents, including Warren County District Attorney Rob Green. You're the top law enforcement officer in Warren County.
I am.
And you can't buy a gun.
That is correct.
Or have a carry permit.
That's correct.
And what is your opinion of that?
I'd like to say but I probably can't say that on camera, but it's wrong. It's absolutely wrong.
Green cannot own a gun because he, like nearly 500,000 Pennsylvanians, has a medical marijuana card. Federal law prevents even legal users of medical marijuana from buying or owning a gun. It says so right on the background check that gun buyers have to fill out. Greg Ionati owns Smokin' Guns in Oakmont.
If you have a medical marijuana card and you're filling out the form and you answer no to that question, you're committing a felony.
It's the same law that led to Hunter Biden's conviction on felony charges for buying a gun while he was using cocaine. You would end up like Hunter Biden.
I would end up like Hunter Biden. Yeah, exactly.
That's what led Green to file this lawsuit, saying the federal law is depriving him of his Second Amendment rights. He's suing Attorney General Merrick Garland and the directors of the FBI and the ATF. You're a prosecutor and you're taking on the top prosecutor in the country. What's that been like for you?
God bless America. Isn't it great?
In court papers, the federal government calls the lawsuit meritless and cites a previous court ruling that there is no constitutional problem with separating guns and drugs. Gun experts say many gun owners and medical marijuana users are not aware of the law. There's close to 500,000 people in Pennsylvania who have medical marijuana cards. How many of those folks do you think might own a weapon?
I mean, it could be more than half, honestly.
Jonathan Stark owns Legion Arms in West Mifflin.
Even if they know that they're not allowed to buy a new firearm, they may not realize that they're also legally not allowed to possess the firearms that they currently have.
Yet the state health department does not ask people applying for marijuana cards if they own a gun. And Action News Investigates learned the agency does not turn over its list of marijuana card holders to state police or any federal agency for background checks. A health department spokesperson says state regulations provide protections against the disclosure of confidential patient data, including a person's participation in the medical marijuana program. Gun owner David Apt is not a marijuana user, but he says the state should be more transparent.
When you go to get a medical marijuana card, they should ask you, do you have guns? Do you plan on getting a gun? Because if getting that card means you can't get a gun later, that could be very frustrating for someone if they decide to get into shooting later on.
It's not just about buying or owning a gun. If you have a medical marijuana card, can you get a carry permit?
The short answer is no.
But that can also be confusing. The state carry permit form asks applicants if they are an unlawful user of marijuana. But unlike the federal form used to buy guns, it does not say medical marijuana is considered unlawful.
There are no questions about medical marijuana. There are questions about unlawful use of marijuana.
So do you think there might be some confusion?
I think there is some confusion.
State Senator Dan Laughlin of Erie has filed legislation that would allow medical marijuana users to get carry permits.
What we're trying to do here is simply have folks that already own guns that have a medical card still be able to get a concealed carry permit.
Laughlin says the federal government should not label marijuana with the same stigma as other drugs like cocaine or heroin.
It seems pretty silly, doesn't it?
Not to advocates who point out that newer forms of marijuana have very high levels of THC, the substance that makes you intoxicated. One study found high THC weed users are nearly 5 times more likely to develop psychosis.
And that's a really scary statistic, and one that I think the public should be more aware of, and one that legislators should keep in the back of their minds as they consider this issue of medical marijuana users having access to firearms.
So am I worried about that? No, not at all, because I don't think it's true.
Still, Warren County's top prosecutor says he is following the law.
I own no guns now. My wife owns lots of guns, but I don't own any guns. All my guns were transferred to her, and they're not in my home, for the feds that might be listening.
Now, the feds are seeking to dismiss that lawsuit that's been filed by DA Rob Green. His fellow plaintiffs include another gun owner as well as the Second Amendment Foundation. As for Green himself, he's planning to retire next year after 12 years as district attorney in Warren County. Reporting live downtown, Paul Van Osdol, Pittsburgh's Action News 4.